Hi everyone, I'm Nat. I am the CEO and founder of EduKit, and I would like to welcome you to today's Positive Place show. So hopefully you know the format, and this is our last week because we're only doing these during school closures, but we've been having an amazing week so far, and we're going to continue that today. So we have two fantastic guests as per normal. If you happen to be watching live, please do post your questions. You can just scroll to the bottom of the page and post them, and we will answer them live on the show. So I'd like to invite our first guest onto the show. She's one of my favorite people in education. She's so passionate about absolutely everything that she does, and I know she's going to have lots of really great insights to share with us today. So our first guest is a lady called Hannah Wilson. She's a former executive head, and she now runs a great organisation called Diverse Educators. So hi, Hannah.
Hello, thanks for having me, Nat.
You're very, very welcome. It's lovely to have you on the show. So do you want to just tell us in a nutshell a bit about what you do at your organisation, and then I will invite on one of our co-hosts and we can start with some questions.
Sure. So I was a teacher for 20 years. I taught English, drama and musicals predominantly in South London. And 6 years ago, I co-organised a grassroots network called Women Ed. And Women Ed is all about women connecting to support one another, because in education we've got a female heavy profession, but we've got a lack of female visible role models at a kind of a senior level. We haven't got very many female heads compared to the number of female teachers. So that was several years ago now. We started this network, had loads of events, and from that it then spawned a series of other affinity groups. BAME Ed, LGBT Ed, Disability Ed. So there were 4 networks you can join if you are an educator, if you have that protected characteristic, which perhaps is an obstacle or could be an obstacle for you in your career. And then when I became a head teacher 3.5 years ago, we were having a conversation with my SLT, and I had a very diverse team. And my deputy head said to me, but what happens, Hannah, when you have more than one of those labels to your identity? Do I have to cut myself into 4 and go to Women Ed one weekend and BAME Ed another weekend and LGBT Ed another weekend? Can't we have one conversation? I'm one human being. So we had this conversation, and as a white woman who didn't have those protected characteristics apart from the gender one, I was like, well, how can I be part of the solution? So we created an event called Diverse Ed. So 4 Januaries ago, we hosted an event, and 250 people came to our school in Oxfordshire, drove from Wales, drove from Kent, drove from Leeds, really excited about this joined up conversation. And I'm all about things being coherent and cohesive and not disjointed and fragmented. So for 3 years, we were just a hashtag, an event once a year, building kind of connections, but quite informal. And then I left headship, and then the pandemic struck. And then George Floyd got murdered. And there's been a succession of quite big milestones. And as you know, in the summer, suddenly the schools woke up. Suddenly the schools realised that we have got a problem, not only in society, but in the school system when it comes to diversity, equity and inclusion. And we suddenly saw a lot of noise and a lot of activity, and it was all quite knee-jerk. And the people who I work with, who've done this work for a while, we were quite worried that things could either go too fast or go off in the wrong direction. So literally last summer, I went to some partner organisations, got some funding, built the website. So the website went live on September the 1st. And the premise of Diverse Educators is we signpost out to the school system individuals and organisations working in this space. So we've got 110 organisations who are working with school leaders, school teachers, school students, parents and carers to address those systemic, structural and societal barriers. And it's just been an avalanche, as you know, of these things. The snowball just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And our events have gone from having 200 people face-to-face to 14,000 people joining us at virtual events. And I think that just shows that it's the time to act, and it's the time for people to listen and to learn. And I'm really hopeful that actually the tide's beginning to turn, and we're going to see some more impact in schools when it comes to diversity, equity and inclusion.
I mean, that's just amazing. And it's great to just see just how popular what you're doing is. And I think one key word is allyship, isn't it? And you really kind of captured it when you said it's not just about having these different silos, but it's also about how each of us can help to be the solution for other people, even if we don't share a characteristic with them, we still want them to do well and to be able to achieve their potential. So yeah, I absolutely love what you're doing. It's fantastic.
Thank you.
Very welcome. Right, so this is a good opportunity for me to bring on my co-host for today. So I want to introduce you to Bula. Bula, hello and welcome.
Hello.
Hi, lovely to see you. Do you have an opening question for Hannah?
How has the pandemic positively affected your charity?
That's a really good question. Can I say you've got the best background? I'm loving the kind of the background there. We're not a charity at the moment. We're an organisation. To become a charity, it takes a lot of work and a lot of time. So in the future, we'd like to become a charity. So at the moment, we're an organisation. How it's affected it is that I think the embracing of virtual technology to do things like this. So I use StreamYard, we use YouTube, we do virtual events now that people come to wearing their pajamas, sat on their couch with a cup of tea, as opposed to driving 3 hours to somewhere at the other side of the country. And I think the commitment, the people who go to the Saturday events about diversity, equity, inclusion, you have to be pretty committed to give up your Saturday and to get up really early and to spend like 6-7 hours on it. Whereas I feel like we're perhaps like reaching a bigger, wider, more diverse audience of people who perhaps wouldn't have booked, wouldn't have come, but they can dip in and out. And like with this, because it's a live broadcast, you can interact with it, but also it becomes a recording. So all of the recordings are now on our website. And I've had amazing messages from people like female deputy heads in my network who have sat and watched it with their husbands and with their teenage children. And normally it wouldn't be a family consumption of that kind of topic, but then the family conversations about homophobia, transphobia, racism, what's going on in schools. I feel that actually that's really important, that it's more of a societal response then rather than a siloed, this is teachers trying to make schools better. So I think it's just that. I think it's the reach. I think it's the opportunities we now have because we've got less barriers when it comes to time, energy and geography.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's possibly, as you said, created opportunities for you because you're able to reach a more engaged audience and you can reach them online. Absolutely. I wanted to pick up on one of the themes you talked about earlier. So you talked about the fact that women are quite well represented within education, but as you kind of go up through the ranks, fewer and fewer women, and you get to headships, and quite a small proportion of heads are women, particularly secondary heads, as I understand it. Why is that? What are some of the root causes?
Okay, so I've actually just done a presentation last night on this because on Monday it's obviously International Women's Day. It's the month of women's history. This year's theme is Choose to Challenge, and that's the hashtag. You pick something to challenge as a woman or as a male ally. There's a number of different things. I think when we think about barriers to progression for women, we need to think about the kind of societal barriers, so the expectations of women and the choices that women make. So the biggest group of teachers who leave education are women in their 30s. And if you think that's women who want to have a family, or women who want to balance having a family with their career, or women who want to return from maternity leave and work part-time, but the schools say no because they want a full-timer. So I think that there's the kind of the societal piece. Then there's the structural piece about how schools are very, very hierarchical, and how there are particular behaviours that are perhaps endorsed, and they might be more masculine leadership traits than female traits. And then there's the kind of the systemic. So if we think about in society, who's running the government? A lot of white straight men. Who's our chairs of governors? Who, like, we've got kind of like a male prototype archetype, which we need to disrupt. So I think there's a number of different layers there. But I do think it's wrong that if 2/3 of our profession are female, why are only 1/3 of our heads female? And there's the concept of glass ceiling. So the glass ceiling in education is very much at like deputy headship level. It's hard for women to get beyond deputy headship to become a head teacher. And as you said, there's less female secondary heads than there are primary heads. So it's perhaps easier to become a primary school female head than it is a male primary school head.
Yeah. And so who's making those decisions around who gets headship? That you can kind of enlighten me in terms of what is there like a panel? So you've got a range of deputy heads or assistant heads who are women. Who gets to decide whether they make it up to headship?
Right, really good question. Okay, so it depends what sort of school you're in. If you're in a maintained school, it would be the governing body doing the selection for a head teacher. If you're in an academy, it would probably be someone from the trust, because you have a different kind of like tier of leadership there. And I think one of the things, like if we think about diversity in other forms, we think about sort of racial representation, or the lack of in organisations. Some organisations do diversity, equity, inclusion training for the panel. Some corporate sectors, like you have to have had unconscious bias training. Not everyone agrees with unconscious bias training, but some sort of training to understand the fact that we do naturally gravitate towards people who look like us, sound like us, and you then recruit in the image of yourself. So if you've got a white, male, straight, cisgender, able-bodied governing body, you're quite likely to then recruit a head teacher who looks like that. So it's about how we can disrupt some of the thinking, some of the behaviours, and present a different type of leadership. And I think that's what it is. Like we need to disrupt all of those different factors. That actually, if we think about COVID, we think about the pandemic and lockdown. Look at the countries who have flourished and thrived. They have all got female heads of state. If we think like Jacinda Ardern, like she's one of my sheroes. Like if you think about how she leads, we need more feminist leaders. We need more leaders who lead in a way that is perhaps disruptive and challenging of the more traditional leadership styles.
Absolutely. And I think within education, there's an opportunity to lead by example, right? Because we're educating the next generation, but then also, by the sounds of it, there's a great pipeline of really talented women in education. So there is a question, which is why is it that they don't make it to the top? So what are some of the practical things that we need to be doing, or we need to be supporting in education, so that we see that change? Because it feels like it's achievable because the pipeline is there.
Another good question, and I think like thinking about Bula and her peers looking up, like where are the visible role models, and not just women of colour, women who are LGBTQI, women with disabilities, like thinking about the intersectional identity of who actually progresses, because it's quite often a straight white woman perhaps who becomes a head teacher. So we need to think about diversity as a holistic thing there. The practical things, it's interesting because we quite often think about what can a woman do, and there's things the woman can do around her confidence, around getting coaching, around leadership development, around the kind of the personal behaviours. But we need to then think about, what does the system do?
Right.
What do the line managers do? Because we can build up the individual to push harder and to be louder and prouder and more confident, but actually we need to change the behaviours actually within the workplace. So for me, it's about how we can be more inclusive. Actually, as a workplace, how can we get men to lean into being allies, as you said, like the he/she advocacy, that we've got men championing women, we've got people looking for different things, because one of the things that comes up quite a lot is the adverts for head teachers read like a man should be applying. The verb choices, the adjective choices, looking for a dynamic, charismatic person with gravitas. Not many women put up their hand up and say, yeah, that's me. They're the 3 words I use to describe myself. So thinking about the language we use from the very, very get-go, about how we position the opportunity, how we recruit, but then how we also retain and develop and mentor and coach. There's a whole sequence of things. So it's a bit of a domino effect, really.
Yeah, there's so much to do. Yeah, you go ahead, Bula.
Your organisation focuses a lot on allyship. How can we be good allies?
Really good question, Bula. Okay, everyone can be an ally. I think sometimes we think about you can only be an ally if you haven't got that particular protected characteristic. So men who support women are he for she. White people who support people of colour are white allies. There's different ways to kind of like support each marginalised group or potentially marginalised group. For me, I think about inclusive allyship, where we can all be an ally for someone else, for the person who has got a different lived experience and different identity to us. So it's thinking about it more inclusively. And I think the key behaviours for me, number one is listening, because quite often the person who's got the dominant characteristic is a talker rather than a listener. And we need people to listen and learn from the people who are sharing their stories. Then there's the learning. Okay, so learning through listening, but also learning through reading and being proactive and using our initiative. If you have got a network that isn't diverse, you can make it diverse. Who do you follow on Twitter? Who you connect with on LinkedIn? Whose blogs are you reading? Like, just what are we consuming? Because quite often our thought leadership is quite insular. And then it's thinking about, when you are more informed and more confident about some of the social justice issues, how can we actually challenge some of the behaviours, challenge the prejudice, challenge the discrimination, challenge the exclusion. So that's then about sort of like standing in solidarity and speaking out on it. And I think some people are really fearful about speaking out and saying, actually, like, can you not interrupt her when she's talking? Like, that's not a very inclusive behaviour. Can you not use that word, please? That's not a politically correct term. I think we need to do that. We need to practice the micro challenges of the words we use, the things we do, because it's not necessarily someone wakes up and thinks, I'm going to be racist today, or I'm going to be homophobic today. It's a succession of small things that they've learned over time, and we need to like unpack and unlearn some of the words we use and some of the ways we interact. And I think I'm excited about your generation, Bula. So I've done 3 assemblies this week to like 450 students at a time in different schools. And I think like the young change makers, the understanding that your generation has about identity, about lived experience, the kind of the agency you have, that to me is really exciting. And I think actually you can model how to be allies for each other, because I've seen from the young people I've taught much more acceptance of diversity. And I'm not saying it's not people's problem, because I'm not saying that at all, but I think your generation has an opportunity to actually model a different way of interacting.
Yeah, thank you.
No, great question about allyship. It's just so important. So you touched on race as well earlier. So it was interesting when we were talking about representation of women in the teaching profession. And when you look at people from BAME backgrounds, particularly people who are from African Caribbean background, I think it's less than 1% who make it to headship. It's a very, very small number. Again, what do you see as the challenges and the opportunities around better representation of people from BAME backgrounds in education?
So I hope I've got the statistics right here. I think we're currently 14% of the country identified as being BAME, but only 11% of our teachers are BAME. So we've got a gap there about representation actually at entry point level. And then when you get to headship level, 1% of heads are BAME, but only 0.1% are Black African. So if you think about the suite of BAME characteristics, there's other identities there not being represented. And in the independent sector, there's only 3 boarding school heads in the country who aren't white. So the independent sector are doing a lot of work on this as well. And if you think about the pupils in primary schools, I think the last time I read the statistic, 24% of children in primary schools are BAME. So if you think about how the increasing diversity of society, dual heritage families, biracial relationships, we've got more diversity coming into the system, but our representation isn't mirroring that. So we're already under, we need to be going over, because actually we've got more diversity coming up. So I think similarly, I mentioned the glass ceiling. One of the concepts about racial diversity is the concrete ceiling, and how there is a systemic structural barrier above people of colour that is even harder to get through. So a glass ceiling, women can see through, but a concrete ceiling is like reinforced. And I think ultimately it comes down to a lack of inclusive behaviours. It comes down to some institutional issues and policies and practices that need disrupting. And no one likes to hear that we've got institutional racism in the education system, but I think we need to be honest with ourselves. And actually there are things that we need to unpack and challenge and change. And like I'm doing quite a lot of work around initial teacher training. And statistically, we hear this story, like people of colour don't want to teach. Like that's I've been told that for 20 years. Like so Black people want to do this and brown people want to do this and Asians want to be a doctor or a dentist. There's quite a lot of cultural and racial stereotypes out there about career pathways. And yes, in some ways, there's high aspirations in some cultures and families, but there are more people of colour applying to teach than get offered. There's a disproportionate number of applications to conversions at entry level. I think a white man is 10 times more likely to get an offer than a Black man. So like when people hear that data, like you have to stop and listen, because there's something going on and there's something we need to acknowledge there. And no one likes to call out racism, but what are we going to call it then? There's something going on here where there is a double standard about who gets through the door. Their face doesn't fit, their name doesn't fit, their qualifications don't fit, they don't sound this, they don't sound that. And I think we really need to do some serious work on that piece. And it goes back to recruitment again, doesn't it, and representation.
Absolutely. And it's so incredibly important in education because, I've done a lot of mentoring and you often hear the term, what they see is what they'll be. So as you're growing up, a lot of your near role models are your teachers. And, if you don't see that representation at all levels, sometimes it's very difficult for young people to think they can be anything they want to be. That's when some of those opinions with some students are formed. So what do you see as ways that we can start to hold the system to account? Because there hasn't been this watershed moment like there was in policing, for example, 20 years ago. How do we get real change in education?
Before I answer that, can I ask you both a question? So, Bula, when you think about who teaches you and who the leaders are in your school, do you see people who look like you in your school, on the teaching team and on the leadership team?
No, actually none. Yeah,
None. You haven't got any women of colour teaching in
no.
your school. See, that says it all, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, one.
One.
Yeah.
Well, one. It's easy to miss, but it's only one. Natalie, how about you?
When I was young, no, I didn't have any teachers of colour through my whole education.
So we think about visible role models and we think about the narrative about who doesn't want to teach. Well, do they not want to teach because they don't see that they can teach, because they've not seen visible role models of themselves? So I think there's something there to disrupt as well. So going back to what we can do. So there's so many things I could say here. I'll try and keep it in a short summary. So the Department for Education used to have a pot of money called the Equality and Diversity Grants, which schools could bid for. And you got a pot of money and you then ran a programme. And you could run a programme to develop women leaders, LGBTQI leaders, BAME leaders. So when I was a deputy head in South London, I think it was like 6 years ago now, I was working for a teaching school and we bid for some of that money. And we had one of the biggest BAME leadership programs in the country. I think we had 85 people, middle leaders to assistant heads. And we had this kind of like 1 year program where we had amazing speakers, workshop facilitators, coaches who were all serving school leaders from a diverse background. And we then created this support network for them. And like, I'm still in contact with a lot of them now. I still get updates where they're getting promotions and they're now coaching other people. So I think that's a real visible commitment about creating spaces and helping people to network, but also thinking about specific skills that perhaps need developing in each of those individuals to prepare them and enable them to progress. And I'm just going to share a story with you, going back to my question to Bula about representation. So we had the launch event at a school in Crystal Palace, the same school, Nat, that you came and did that knife crime conference with me. So a school that has, I think, like 55-60% of the students are BAME. They didn't have any BAME SLT. They had quite a number of BAME teachers and middle leaders. So at the launch event, we had 90 school leaders, people of colour, in this room with big windows all around it. And we were just about to kick off the launch of our conference. And I just saw a sea of faces. There was all these faces kind of like pressing at the windows and the doors. Like, what is going on? Who are all these people? Why are they in our school? And it caused a bit of a fuss. Like, there was like students piling in to see what was going on. And I can remember opening the door and saying, is everything all right, guys? What's up? And they were like, Miss, who are all these people? Where do you find all these black and brown people from? Are they coming to work at our school, Miss? And there was this excitement that the young people were seeing themselves, and they'd never seen so many BAME professionals in education in one room before. That to me was a really, really powerful moment in my own kind of like consciousness about the power of visibility and the power of representation. And I think it's that, like, there's so much work to be done. I've done a lot of work recently around governance. Like, if we diversify our governing bodies, we might then diversify our head teachers and our SLT. It's all about thinking, like, who's got the power, who's got the privilege, whose voices are we listening to? How can we make sure that there's representative experience and voices in these spaces disrupting this thinking?
Absolutely. Yeah, Bula, did you have a question?
And also, what do you think about, the government and education failing to teach us about BAME history and the effects of colonialism and how that could affect us wanting to teach, because our education, our history isn't really taught in our education?
Great question, Bula. Okay, so thinking about visibility and representation and can everybody see themselves in the curriculum is really key. I was an English teacher as I said, so I think the library is also a really important resource. Like, can people go into the library and see books written by people who look like them, have had a similar story to them? Because there's some real work to be done there. And I think some schools are doing some great work around diversifying their curriculum. Some people are looking at decolonising their curriculum, and that's a whole different level, I think, of disruption. The Black curriculum, the charity The Black Curriculum, Lavinia Stennett, who spoke at the last event, is doing amazing work around re-educating. But in all honesty, it's going to take us years to get the curriculum diversified. Like, we're talking here 3 to 5 years. We're not going to suddenly sort out sort of like early years to sixth form, every single subject in a school. But there's some quick wins about being really intentional by design. So what year are you in, Bula?
Year 11.
You're in year 11, okay. So if you think about your GCSE English literature curriculum, you get taught the books that you get taught. You don't necessarily know the process that happens behind that. So the exam board publishes the specification. That goes out to all the schools. And then the head of subject will look at that specification and shortlist which novels, which prose, which plays, which poetry was going to be taught. And there might be some collaboration, some contribution from the rest of the team. And then that might go to SLT, and the deputy head of the curriculum might have a look at it. So there are a few opportunities there for people to say, well, that's not very representative. There's a lack of diversity there. But what's happening is you've got different people applying filters to that specification. Okay, so like when I was teaching English in one of my schools, I had 10 English teachers, but they were all white women, white British women. So they look at that spec and they apply their filter and they choose their favourite playwright, their favourite novel, their favourite poetry, and then you get the school's interpretation of what the curriculum is. And then I can remember as a deputy head being sent the English map for the curriculum. I was like, why is it all white writers? And my head of English said, what do you mean? I said, there's diversity on the specification. Why isn't there diversity in our curriculum? And it's because we've got an unconscious bias there. We've got our own lived experience. We've got our own education. We've got our own beliefs, our own passions. And they'd picked perhaps a novel with a theme that resonates with them, as opposed to thinking about who the children who are going to consume this curriculum and can they see themselves in the text we're teaching. So I think there's something there about the process we go through, and it's about how can we retrain teachers about how to design a curriculum and how to be inclusive by intent, rather than, oh gosh, my curriculum's not very diverse, let's wedge in a bit here and wedge in a bit there. And that's when it becomes tokenistic. And you as the receiver, Bula, you can see that it's disjointed. You can see that it's not met in a meaningful way. It's like you're doing Shakespeare for 6 weeks and then suddenly one lesson you do a poem by a black man. Tick, that's our diversity for this scheme of work. So it's about how we can be really, really consciously intentional in the design process and thinking holistically about the curriculum, but also thinking about the needs of the people we're actually teaching as well.
Brilliant. And yeah, I think it's so important it's cross curriculum, because what we've seen is people starting to say we need to incorporate BAME voices within history. But when it comes to, as you said, literature, it could be across the spectrum of subjects. It's still very, very Eurocentric. So absolutely.
Eurocentric. And something else, like Bula, you're on mute, darling. Are you talking?
Sorry, my mum was just talking to me, and I didn't want you to.
Oh, it's fine. I thought you were asking me questions. It's fine. I love that. We're live. So one of the things to also think about is that sometimes schools can think their curriculum is more diverse than it is. Yeah. And one of the challenges, so my co-founder, my old deputy head, Benny, she always says, like, if you take out the diversity of your curriculum from PE and music, who are you left with? Right. So it's like certain subjects are perhaps more intentional around diversity, but then what are we perpetuating there as a narrative? That if you are a black boy, you can be a runner. If you are a black boy, you can be a rapper. We're not necessarily if you're a black boy, you can be a computer scientist. So I think it's about thinking about the diversity across all of the subject areas as opposed to just pockets, because it can become quite tokenistic as well. Bula, does that resonate about, like, particularly like different subjects perhaps being more committed to diversity?
Yeah, definitely.
And we need to see it across the spectrum. We've run out of time, Hannah. I'm absolutely gutted because I could just literally sit and talk to you all afternoon, had so many other topics to discuss. It's so important what you champion. So I'd like to salute you for all the amazing work you do. And I think that just in closing, I think the one thing that's resonated is that we can all be allies for ourselves and each other, and that it's so important to listen and to stand up for those who need our voices. I think that's probably what I would say in closing. Thank you so much.
Can I do one plug? So
yes,
we do a terminally diverse ed event, and at our event in January, we had our first youth panel. So we had 5, 16, 17-year-olds talking about diversity. So if you go onto the Diverse Educators website, you can find panel 5. Go and watch it. 45 minutes of 16 and 17-year-olds disrupting the system, disrupting society. And if you are doing something as a young person around diversity and you want to contribute, you can contact me via the website, and I would love to publish your blog or get you on one of our panels in the future.
And actually, we can facilitate that. I don't know if you know that we have an app, so I'd love to put your panel discussion onto our app for the students who use it, and then see whether we can help you to find students from our work experience program like Bula who want to be part of your panel. So we will definitely keep in touch for sure. This is such an important conversation. Thanks again.
Perfect. Thanks for having me. Nice to meet you, Bula. Take care.
Also, can I just ask, if there's any way of contacting you so that you can speak to my school? Because
yes, I'd love to.
Yeah.
Natalie,
we will put you in touch.
Yeah.
I'd love to meet your school. Nice to meet you both. Take care.
Thanks, Hannah. Bye. So that was Hannah again. She is the founder of Diverse Ed. Just as I said, I've got so many positive things to say about Hannah and the work that she does, and she was giving us some of her perspectives on what we need to change in education. So we're just going to keep going. I would like to bring on our next guest. If you're watching live, please do post your questions. So our next guest is actually back by popular demand. He was one of our first guests when schools closed. And the student interns who are now working with us, like Bula, went through all of the guests and really wanted to have him back on the show. So I'm absolutely delighted to welcome back PC Charles Francis. Hi, Charles.
Hi there, can you hear me okay?
We can hear you just great.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for asking for me to come back. It says something when people ask you to come back. It could say, we're giving one more try, so we can laugh at it or whatever.
We didn't get it the first time. We'll try again. No.
Again, excellent. So
no, this is definitely a back by popular demand, and the students really did want to invite you back and to ask some questions. Unfortunately, we had a student drop out last minute, but we have Bula who's here, who will be supporting me on questions.
Hi, Bula.
Hi.
So maybe for those who didn't watch the first show, do you just want to give a bit of an overview of your role within the police force?
Okay, so my name is PC Francis. I'm a police constable. I'm currently a schools officer, so I work closely with young people in the schools. But prior to that, I've been a response officer. I've been a level 2, which means that we deal with riots and stuff like that, officer. So, you know, I've been in the job for over 10 years, and I've had a lot of experience in it. So, but what I'm going to do is I was going to play something, if you don't mind. I've got something I'm going to play you first, and then we can start have a discussion. But I just wanted to play you something first.
Sounds good to me. Is Emma going to help us with that? Or are you sharing your screen yourself? Okay.
Is she there? Because she's actually typed to show the video.
Emma, you good to...
Over 8.5 million people. Most don't really know us. They just know we're here, helping them sleep at night, keeping them safe, protected, away from the gangs, the drugs, the knives. But for some, for the 160,000 we arrest, they don't sleep so easy. We're the first through the door, catching the thieves, the muggers, the murderers. It can be the hardest job in London. But ask any of us why we do it, and we'll tell you we wouldn't do anything else. Because we're a team, getting it done, dealing with life, death, crime, and its victims. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. each one different to the next. It's why we can't wait for our shift to start, and sometimes end. But knowing you're doing good, stopping others do bad, makes you feel proud. Taking care of family, friends, neighbours, London. It's the greatest reason in the world. Do something real. Become a police officer in London's Met. Search Met Police Careers.
Okay. I wanted to show you that, not because I'm here to recruit. I'm not here as a recruiter for the police force. But the reason why I wanted to show you that is because I want young people and yourself and people in general just to find something and do something. Find something positive that you can do in your life and make ways ahead and try to do it. Be an ordinary person doing something extraordinary, because most people of your age are not doing it. Now's the time to think, and that's why I showed you this video, to show you what we've embarked on, myself as a police constable, not to try to recruit you to be a police officer. If you don't want, that's fine, but whatever you choose to do, find something while you're young and make ways to find to discover and learn more about it. So that's over. So let's just have our conversation now.
Now let's go into the questions. But you're right. It's about not setting limits for ourselves and really following our passions and going for it. Right, so I have a question to kick off, really, and it's kind of in keeping with the theme that we had from Hannah's presentation, which was all about the lack of diversity, particularly in leadership positions in Education. And of course, we know that same lack of diversity is also in policing. So is there anything you can talk to in terms of the changes you've either seen or you think need to happen in the police force in general, so that there's better representation in terms of the communities that you serve?
That's a fantastic question, and I'm going to be honest with you. What I share with you now is my personal views. I'm not a spokesperson for the Met, although I do have an obligation to hold myself in a good way. But this is more personal views, because it's a great question, and it's a question that many of us don't really address. Hence why we don't have as much ethnic and minority people inside the police force. They use the word BAME, is that right? Yeah, so we don't have enough BAME people within the workforce. So personally, I feel that there's not enough BAME people in the higher leadership roles, but a lot of that is because of how we've growing up. For me, I grew up not liking the police. I mean, I didn't really have a good relationship with the police at all when I was growing up. So I had to unravel my thoughts. I had to change my perception about police. I always believed if you want to change something, you have to be in it. You know that saying, you've got to be in it to win it? Yeah, because if you're not in it, how can you change it? There's no point in sitting from the back and then commenting and complaining if you're not going to try and make an active change yourself. So I joined the police. So if I could, one person, change the mindset of one person, then maybe that one person will lead to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5. Sorry, Nat, coming to your particular question as to what can we do, I think it's what the individual can do. What I'm doing now, I'm speaking to you. Maybe after this conversation, you leave and say, oh, PC Charlie's all right, I didn't think he was, I thought he was going to be someone else. And then you go and talk to your friend and say, I spoke to that PC, he was down to earth, he was okay. And then to the next person, and then we slowly break down the barriers and the stereotypes of all police officers, because we are ordinary people.
Yeah. I'm just going to ask a follow-up question, and then I'll allow Buda to come in with her questions. But you're absolutely right about representation. I think there's a saying which is, if you're not at the table, you're probably on the menu, or something like that. If you don't have a seat at the table, you're probably on the menu. So if you want to make sure your voice counts, you really have to be part of organizations.
Right.
You're absolutely right. I know a lot of people in the Black community who have certain perceptions of the police and don't feel that the police are working in their favor. So how did you reframe your views around policing to go from somebody who maybe had some of those views to actually being somebody who's in the force and was prepared to take your career there?
Interesting. How did I reframe my own views of the police? I really took it day by day, each day at a time, really. I really, when I first came in to join the police, I found it very difficult. I found it difficult because my mindset was very different from a lot of the people that were currently police officers. Growing up in the estate, growing up, you know, being exposed to gangs and violence and everything, my whole mindset was very different to how they understand and process behavior. Because it is also the way you process behavior. For me, I had different excuses. To them, they would have different reasons why people behave certain way. So I had a little difficult doing it. So I kind of had to take it day by day and then find my own way. So like I always talk about being the leader and not a follower. It doesn't matter where you are, you be the leader of your own position. So even if you're in school and you're around certain friends, they may all be a certain way, but you've still got to be the leader of yourself. So I found my way of being a leader within my own police borough where I was. And I became my own leader and started to do things that I felt with integrity, professionalism, and compassion. But it was my interpretation of it. And I kept on doing that, and then reached out to more and more people, and until I found my foot in.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Charles. So Bula, over to you.
Following the Black Lives Matter movement in summer, how do you think the police contributes to systemic racism, or do you think it doesn't at all, or what's your view on that?
Okay, systematic racism is a big question, Bula. That's a big question there. Can you put me in the spot? Nah.
And do you also mean in the US, or do you mean in the UK?
In the UK.
In the UK. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think obviously racism has been an issue that's been around for a long time, and it still exists today. It's easy. I find it's easy to highlight certain institutions and certain organizations. I mean, being at the front line, police officers being at the front line of the ones who are always going to be the first ones to go to incidents where people are running away from, they're going to be an easy target to be the forefront of institutional racism. We all know that the system isn't 100% equal. We know that. We know there's not enough BAME leaders within the police force, but we also see them trying to address it, and it's like a cut edge of a sword, because you know the police have made initiatives of trying to employ more and more BAME community. At the same time, that has a backlash, because a lot of us that are within the police force, we think, why are you singling us out? You know, why are you just singling us out and trying to recruit more of us? And then therefore you're making the other people feel that, you know, they're treating us unfairly, or you know, than a lot of the white colleagues. So this systematic racism thing is a big issue, but for me personally, I can't understand. I can't give you a concrete answer around why it exists or if it exists within the police force. I feel that you as an individual are going to have to try to make your own little sense of it, but not let it affect you on what the things that you're going to do and the moves you're going to make in your future. I know I went kind of around the bush around it, answering the question.
You're on mute.
Thank you, Bula. Sorry about that. No, I think I think one of the challenges with that response is just that as we were talking about perceptions of policing, and then you also look at some of the systemic racism that exists, it does have a damaging effect to community relations when people feel that they're not being treated fairly. So I think that there's definitely space for us to hold our police force or police forces to higher standard in terms of how they treat people and the accountability. And I think one of the most visible representations of that is stop and search. I mean, can you talk a little bit about stop and search and some of maybe the criticisms of it, but also the rights that people have around stop and search that perhaps they're not familiar with?
Well, before I talk about stop and search, it's important to note that we need to talk about systematic racism in the police force. There's two avenues here you're talking about. I mean, there's one side of it, meaning that there's not enough black BAME officers in the force, and there's the other side of it in how the police force conduct themselves to the members of the public.
Yep.
You know? So there's two different things here. I was really referring to the structural side of things. But if you're talking about
representation in the force,
now you've mentioned about stop and search is more in relation to how we police force deal with the public. Is that?
And let me check with Bula. What did you mean when you were talking about the Black Lives Matter movement and systemic racism? Did you mean it more from the perspective of how, say, Black people or people of color are treated by the police, or did you mean more in terms of representation within the police force?
Yeah,
I meant treated by the police, but I do think that not having Black people in a position of power affects the way, you know, people of color are treated.
yes. And I think you're 100% right, and that's what we need to address, because it's not so much about just them not recruiting Black people. It's also Black people don't want to be police officers, you know, and that's a part of the issue that we have to address, of trying to encourage them to be a part of the community, to be a part of, to be a part of the community that they live in. You know, because whether we like it or not, we live in here, and it is the same police force that is going to come to our protection or whatever, come to our defense. So we really need to become part of this community and make changes, make waves, make our voice heard, and then hopefully in time things will change. Stop and search. Sorry. Now, stop and search.
No, fine. Let's go.
In terms of stop and search, I know a lot of Black people and young people that I speak to believe that they're the ones that are stopped and searched more frequently than their white counterparts, and treated unfairly. There's a lot around stop and search. One thing we do have to take into account is the demographics. You know, obviously we all know that when we look at the demographics in general, you know, you have areas that are predominantly populated by BAME people, areas predominantly populated by white people, and even within the BAME community, there's areas predominantly populated by Asian or Black and so forth, and then there's areas that are predominantly dominated by white people. Now, if we took the stop and search statistics on each of these boroughs, then you're going to find that it's going to be more of that, whatever origin of that ethnic community is based on, they're going to be stopped more in that. And I can see how some areas people say, oh, I'm always stopped all the time, I'm stopped more than my white counterparts, and you probably will be, because there's more of you in that community. And also they're probably, I'm not saying it's level, because it's still unlevel in terms of the wider generation of people, Black people getting stopped more than whites, but a lot of that is to do with demographics as well. We do have to take that into account.
Yeah. And I mean, what things can people do if they are being stopped and searched? Because I think that education is power. And therefore, if you understand what your rights are, that even for whatever reason, and, you know, justly or unjustly, you find yourself in that situation, at least you can make sure that you know your rights and you can have the most favorable outcome, you know, given where you are. So yeah, what sorts of things can people do around stop and search?
So I mean, the number one key thing, I mean, because a lot of us don't remember legislation and a lot of young people don't know police powers and what they can do. So the number one thing that we all should know is you've got to stay calm. You've got to stay calm. You've got to realize that that officer is stopping you for a reason. You may not agree with that reason, but they're stopping you for a reason. So now you just have to stay calm, because if you've done nothing wrong and that officer has finished his conduct or whatever his inquiries are, then you'll be on your way, you know, and then it'll all be finished. But if you start, I know you have reason to be upset, but if you start vocalizing and behaving this upset, and you start taking, you know, getting out of control, then what happens is one thing leads to another and leads to another, and then the whole purpose gets broken down. So the number one key thing is stay calm. The second thing is, when you're staying calm and so forth, I know it's not a nice experience to be stopped and searched by an officer. So you're probably going to leave there all frustrated and angry and really upset with what's happened. So the next thing is, if you feel you've been treated unjustly by that officer, make a complaint. Make a complaint. We have to be held accountable for our actions as police officers. You know, we're not unruly. At the end of the day, we have to account for our actions. So if you feel you've been treated unfairly, make a complaint. Go and tell your parents and say to your parents, no, I'm not having this. I want to go to a police station. I want to make a complaint in that officer. 3, in order to make that complaint, what do you need? You do need that officer's details. So be wise about this now. 1, in every stop and search, they have to tell you their details. But just in case they haven't, or for whatever reason, you take it upon yourself to look at their shoulder number, look at their badge, their name. If they haven't got their name, they will all have a shoulder number. take this for your own reference. So when you go home and say, look, I got stopped by this PC's 1610 AW. I don't know his name, but that was his shoulder number. He didn't do this, mum. He pushed me, mum. Or he didn't stop. He didn't tell me why he was stopping me for. And all of a sudden he was just being rude. Make a complaint. We will do inquiries into it. And if anything, at least you've been heard.
Brilliant. And you know what? I didn't even realize you all had individual numbers on your.
We do. Yeah, we all have individual numbers which were unique to us. So even if you don't remember their name, take their number.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you. So just a quick follow-on question from me, and then Bula, I'll pass over to you for another question. So I do a lot of work with young people who are at risk of youth violence. And there's a really clear message from the Met and from everybody, and myself included, that it is never okay to carry a weapon when you leave home, that you should absolutely never carry a knife. But there are young people who are scared in their local communities, who have genuine fears around their safety. So what would you suggest if there's a young person who's watching who thinks, you know what, in my area, I'm not going to be safe if I go out at night, so I just carry it for protection? How would you explain to that young person not to do that, and also importantly give them an alternative? Okay,
well, first and foremost, obviously, carrying any form of a weapon is really putting yourself in the firing line that you may have to end up using it for your protection or for defense, or it may get taken against you and used against you. So it's a difficult one, because if you're feeling threatened inside your house and you're carrying a weapon for outside, I think the harsh reality of it is that most people that carry weapons are the ones who end up getting hurt by that same weapon that they're carrying. And that is the reality of it, Mm-hmm. And I understand, look, if I don't carry that weapon, then what might happen to me? So the key really is that you can't stay silent. You have to tell someone, if it's not just going to go away by just thinking it's going to go away. If you're in a predicament with someone, or you're having a conflict with someone, you really do need to tell someone. Tell an adult. Tell someone who can get that help you seek. And I know that the police don't always do the right thing, and we don't always solve issues, but we certainly would do our best. You certainly would do our best. Once you tell us and we're aware of the situation, we can do further inquiries. We can add on more police patrols in that area, visible presence in that area. We can deter situations. We can make things calm down a little bit, at least until that person sees sense. Or we can even interview people. We can even talk to people so they know they're on our radar. And if anything happens to you, we will know where to go. And I know this doesn't comfort you and say 100% security for you, but you've got to understand that there's only so much we can do, and a lot of it does actually rely on yourself, removing yourself from situations, telling people where you're going, what time you're expected to come back, who you're going with, these type of things, they all help.
No, absolutely. No, I think that's great advice, Charles. And at the end of the day, the police, you guys work for us, right? So if you feel unsafe, then we need to reach out to you and ask you to help us out.
Let's correct something. We work with you.
Ah.
Yeah, we work with you. Because we have to work together. We work with you. Yeah, so we're all working. We're all in this mess together. At the end of the day, the whole idea of the police force really is to keep the capital safe, to keep the city safe. To have a Met that reflects London and feels and reflects London, and so our communities work with our communities so they can value the work we do and the difference that we make. We're not on it alone. If it's just police force, it's useless. You know what I mean? So we're all working together.
Yeah, you're right. It's an important distinction. Okay, so Bula, do you have another question?
How can we fix the disconnect between BAME communities and the police force?
Excellent question. How can we kind of bridge that gap? Is that what you're trying to ask? Between the relationship, yeah? A good way of answering a question is ask myself, how can I? That's a great way of answering a question, because if you ask yourself, how can you, then if you duplicate that by 10, 20, 30, 40, then you've got more of like-minded people doing the same thing. So let me ask you the question. How can you break the barrier that exists between the BAME community and police?
Have an open mind.
I actually think that's a really good starting point, actually, because so much of it is about what we think, isn't it, Buddha?
Yeah, and
And
the perfect answer: have an open mind, and that's what we as police officers need to do. We also need to have an open mind as well, because you have to remember, when we come into this job, we bring all our past, we bring all our opinions, we bring all our judgments. They come into this job with us, and it's for us now to create that professionalism, to be able to separate that and have an open mind to different cultures, different ways of life, different opinions, and to just do something on a professional way. So. Yeah, so firstly, that's what we need to do. That's how we need to bridge that gap. That's how I would figure it. That's all right.
okay, I just think she's having a few tech problems. Thank you, Buddha. I mean, I'll also put my my perspective across, and one of the reasons I love having you on and I love doing work around this area is because I really want the community to feel much more connected with policing. So I know you weren't on your recruitment drive, but I'm going to put it out there that if people do want to join the police, you should absolutely consider it. If you want to be an active force in your community to really make a change, if you see the levels of youth violence we have on the street and you want to do something, a really good thing to do is actually to look at policing, because aside from the fact that you're making a real difference, you're also, importantly, getting onto a great career path. I mean, starting salaries are, is it 27,000? It's something, it's as a school leaver. So this with the potential of also getting a degree at the same time. So it's a really, really good career option. I'd love to see more people of colour consider it.
And a fantastic thing that you said as well, because, and also the thing about the police is that you can have career breaks, you know, so you can enter this, and for example, you can take like a 3 or 4 year career break, venture into something else, see if that's not for you. If it's not for you, then you can come back. And and if you look at like a time now, we're in during this pandemic, COVID, a lot of like businesses and work people suffered, but we've still got a job. We're still there. You know, we still got that job security. So it is a fantastic job. It is a life-changing job, because the things you're going to see and the things you're going to experience in this job. That's why I say it's ordinary people doing extraordinary things. You know, so what, you know, that's why make sure what you do, because you are special. You know, you're very special. We've lost this idea of telling the young people how special you are. If you look at all the famous people, the people that you see now, all your idols. Sorry, Bula, give me one of your idols. Say one of your idols. Anyone, musician, sports, doesn't matter. One of your idols.
Malala.
Huh?
Malala.
Okay, Malala. You take Malala. What, I don't know who it is, but you take Malala. Yeah. Once upon a time, that Malala was the same age as you are right now. The same age as you are right now, probably having the same conversation to someone else, not knowing what they really want to do in their life. And they was that same position. And then they decided, they make a decision and they follow that path. And now they're special in the eyes of many. So they were always special in the eyes of some people in the beginning. You're always special. You're special right now. It's for you to take a special path and do something with your life.
Yeah, wise words, Charles. And Buda's one of the interns on our program, and I can say that I can see just how special she and her peers are. I'm just so incredibly inspired by all of them. You should see what they do behind the scenes to make this show happen there.
Even to be here, you know, you're putting yourself way above the others. So well done to you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, listen, we're about at time, but Buda, did you have a last question for Charles, or?
No.
Okay, well, I will wrap up then. What's next for you then? I mean, obviously, when things start opening up a bit more, do you go back into school? Presumably you've not been in school recently.
Exactly. Yeah. So when the schools open, I'll be going back into school, doing a lot of presentations, a lot of talks to schools about, you know, because alongside my police work, I have a company called Ground Level Coaching, which is a coaching, life coaching. I'm a certified life coach. So I really want to bring into the coaching into the young people. I really like to coach and give them words of wisdom alongside my policing as well. So I tie the two together. And that's my mission right now, is to go into schools, youth clubs and stuff like that, and really motivate and inspire young people to make that difference from now. So I did hear you say to the other lady about coming to your school doing a talk. I'll always be welcome. I'll always be up to go to your school to do a motivational talk, if that's something that you guys would like.
Okay, yeah.
Look at that, 2 speakers, Buddha. And I will also say that I would love to have some of your motivational talks on our app.
Oh, I would love to do that. I would love to do that.
Students' hands, and as Buddha will know, because she was on our work experience program. So we just love, the last session was much more focused on you and your journey. And for those who are watching, it was fascinating. So please do check it out. Today's been a bit more about your career, but yeah, it's always great to hear from you. So I'd love to get more of that onto the app.
Excellent. Thank you so much for having me as well. I'd love to be a part of this. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Charles. All the best. And we will keep in touch.
Thank you very much. Take care, Bula. Thanks, Nat.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, so we're just wrapping up now. I'm sure Buda's got to get back to her classwork as well, because this is the end of your lunch break. So first of all, huge thanks to our speakers today, Hannah and PC Charles. And I hope you enjoyed it. We're back again tomorrow from 12 to 1. This is our last week, although we will be doing something a little bit special for International Women's Day on Monday. But after that, we won't be having these webinars. So thanks to you for watching. A huge thanks to Bula. Amazing job on the questions there, for joining me today. Take care, and we hope to see you tomorrow. Bye.